So welcome everyone to the second Zoom for the Rose Trellis Shawl KAL. I really appreciate you all joining me on a lovely Saturday afternoon. And today what we're going to do is pick up on doing tips and tricks. So I'm going to help you out with the border and doing a bit of troubleshooting when you get to the border as well. And I'm going to demonstrate an alternate version of a border in case you don't want to do the leaves, or in case what I know at least one lady has run into where she's been a bit off gauge and so she didn't think she had enough yarn to do the leaf border itself. And some people just don't want to do a leaf border. So I'm going to show you an I-cord bind off that will give you a contrast color there, but won't use as much yarn as the leaf border that is written into the shawl. So we'll cover all of those and then we can do some Q&A and show and tell if anybody would like to do that. It's too bad that we don't have a couple of people who were in the studio earlier this week joining us because they had finished their shawls and it would be fun to see them. But hopefully they will share them online so everyone can get a chance because some of them were custom colors. So the other thing that we're going to do is we'll do this about 10 minutes in just in case anybody else joins, but I am going to do a draw for a $50 gift certificate. I get a kick out of giving out a gift certificate or some sort of prize when we do KALs because it's always nice to just have that little sort of icing on the cake. And I see Tanya is, she has her shawl here, and that's really fun because Tanya has some custom color choices as well. So I think that we'll have a really fun time with our show and tell. So in regards to the Rose Trellis Shawl, last time what we did was we went through all of our mosaic and how to work mosaic, and we went through our twisted stitches and how to do twisted stitches. If anybody is still confused on that or wants some help on it, feel free to ask. But one of the things I wanted to talk today about was customizing the shawl a little bit. So there's two schools of thoughts, one of which is that you must knit a piece exactly as the designer has written it. Or there's the school of thought, and I will put my hand up for this one, that says, why not make it your own a little bit? Why not, do something different to it? You can change elements up and you can have some fun with it. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was to give you some ideas of things that you could do to customize it, or if there are issues that arise in the knitting where you have accidentally made a design decision, what you can do about that as well. So one of the issues that sometimes people come up with is that they don't care for the edges on a shawl. So they might be done one way and you have your own personal preference. So you can, what do you do about that? Shawls like this are really easy to change up because you can change the type of edge on here. So you could do a slip stitch on both edges. You could do garter on both edges. You could even substitute things like an I-cord on both edges. So the way that you do that when you're looking at a pattern is you look for what sort of increases and decreases, if any, are happening on the edge of the shawl. And if you choose to make a change that where you need different numbers of stitches, you can either move the increase or decrease inwards a little bit to give you more stitches on the edge. So I'm thinking maybe I might like to put an I-cord edge on it. So I-cord usually is done with 3 stitches. So what I would do then is I would move my increases on the right side first part of the row in a couple of more stitches to give me 3 edge stitches, and then I could work an I-cord edge. And the same thing with the outer edge. If you did that, you would also check to see how many stitches you have before you're doing the other edge of the shawl has a decrease. So you'd want to make sure you had the right number of stitches. So one of the ways that you can customize shawls is to play with that. And I actually designed one shawl called Monument Valley where the edge changes periodically on one side of it because changing that edge allowed me to give you more of a consistent gauge on the edge of the shawl. So sometimes when you put mosaic and then something else like maybe some stranded work side by side, they might not pull in the same amount. And so if you change the edge on them, that means you don't get an edge that binds on the shawl. So one of the shawls that I did does that. So you as a knitter could potentially want to play with that. But I get asked this often, almost like people are ashamed if they can change the edge. And I'm like, of course you can. And you can do anything you want to a shawl. So in this case, if you don't like the twisted roses, you have the designer's permission not to knit them. And I know there's somebody in our stitch group right now who has done that because she just really liked her background color and wanted to let it do all of the talking in the shawl. And her shawl is absolutely beautiful. So no reason that you can't take those out. I know some people don't like doing things like mosaic, so what you could do is just substitute bands of twisted roses all the way through instead. So there are ways to customize a shawl like this and really make it your own. And then a third person that I know of, she changed her blossom bud bands up quite often throughout the shawl. So she swapped out different colors. So she used it basically as a stash buster for some sock yarn. So that was a really fun thing to do because she has different bands throughout of different colors. And I thought that was a really inventive way of customizing the shawl to make it her own. So you do have my full permission and enthusiastic thumbs up if you want to customize one of these to make it a little bit more your own garden. Anyway, the rose garden that inspired this is the garden that I like to sit in when I go out to Bouchard Gardens in British Columbia. It's on Vancouver Island and it's just out of Victoria. You can find photos of it online, so if you'd like to have a look at it, you can. And one of the reasons why I wanted you to be able to do a little bit of customizing on this shawl is every time I go to that garden, they've done something different. So there might be a new sculpture, they might have moved the beds of roses around, they might have changed out a bunch of varieties. There's always a great big long walkway with a trellis that supports their climbing roses, but in terms of what they have in the arcs of rose beds themselves, sometimes there's a vast number of tea roses that are organized by colors. Other times they might move them around so that they're mixed, and so that's why it's fun to be able to customize your shawl in that way a little bit too. The other thing with this shawl is that for the most part, we've picked background colors that were not too busy, so gentle speckles and semi-solids. But again, a way to customize this shawl would be to make the area with the twisted roses, so that's the background color, make that a more vibrant and bright and busier color, and then just not put the twisted roses in, but let the yarn do the talking for you. So there are a lot of colors that you can do that with that'll do something really interesting in an asymmetric bias shawl. They'll form swirls and so on. And in order to know if a colorway would do that, what you would do is look at the length of the sections of color in the skein. So if the skein has sections of color that are about 5 or 6 inches or more, then you're going to get some distinct patterning. And in fact, in the original here, you can see a little bit of it in the center of this shawl. So you see that swirl with that sort of gray and peach color there. So this is where you have a skein of yarn that has some distinct sections of color in it, and you can get that effect in a shawl. Asymmetric bias moves the yarn around in a way that will cause those swirls. So they also kind of mimic the idea of the arcs of the beds of roses in the Bouchard Garden Rose Garden. So that's something that you can play with too. And like I say, I get a lot of people worried about if they've changed up a pattern that I've written. And I'm like, no, I never leave a pattern alone myself. And I'm actually wearing a shawl by Stephen West right now because I wanted just a tiny bit of a cover on my shoulders. And I need my rose trellis for, what we're demonstrating. And I will admit I changed his shawl up a little bit there. I'm trying to remember what exactly I did to it, but the fact that it's as big as it is suggests that one of the things I did was make it too large. I have a bad habit with Stephen West shawls of knitting them at a bigger gauge than he does because I like them to be a little bit more airy and I like big shawls. Although there is one hanging on the wall of my studio that is 8.5 feet wide and was not supposed to be. So sometimes I get carried away. But anyway, you do have the ability to change these up. And remember, if you go back to the first zoom, that the twisted roses themselves, you can make them more prominent or less prominent by doing them as either little cables, which makes them recede into the background more, or as twisted stitches, which makes them pop up a little bit more. So there's lots of things that you can play with there. And then the third thing that you could do to customize this shawl is if you really don't like working the stitch that forms those little blossom buds, for some reason I can't talk today, then you could actually eliminate those and just make them garter stripes. So lots and lots of things that you can do to play with it. And of course, you're probably all halfway through your shawl by now and are going, why didn't she say this the first time? But the reason that I'm bringing it up today is the fact that I've had questions about that throughout the course of the last 4 weeks. And so I thought, why not mention this to people? Because if you decided to make a second one, you could customize it and change it up some. I did mention that you could change the edges to do things like an I-cord edge, and I really favor I-cord edges. And there's one on this shawl, which I really like because it gives a very round finished edge. And I can show it to you under the camera when I switch to the overhead camera in a bit. If you do that on a shawl that has a curve in it, just make sure that those stitches are nice and loose. So if you substituted the slip stitch and garter edges on rose trellis with I-cord, you will want to make sure that you leave those stitches a bit floppy so that they can expand when the shawl is pulled out into an arc. I-cord can be a little bit rigid, and so one of the tricks there is if you're having trouble making your stitches floppy, work them with a DPN so that they're larger, and that will give the ease that you need. So with the shawl that I'm wearing, I actually went up a needle size when I bound this off to give this some elasticity. And so I have what the shawl needs because it is lace there. And if it was completely rigid, the lace would not be able to be blocked out as well as it is. So that's just a little tip to watch out for with edges, is just think about the tightness of your stitches. And if you're not a person who can adjust them on one needle, pick up a DPN to knit those. So we are now about 10 minutes into our Zoom, and that means that what I would like to do is to draw a $50 gift certificate. So what I'm going to do is use a random number generator, and I'm going to use the number of people that are currently in our Zoom here, and I need to subtract myself. Okay. Usually I have somebody in the background doing this for me, so you guys don't have to watch it. All right, Deborah, you are our winner. So congratulations, Deborah. What I would like you to do is to email me, and you can email right through the website. It's the info@ancientartsfiber.com. That'll come to me. And then what we'll do is we'll set up your $50 gift certificate for you, and you can use that online or in store at any time. They don't get old, but I just thought it was fun to do that. So Deborah, you are our winner. And thank you to everybody else who's here, because like I say, I really appreciate not having to talk to the black screen of doom on the screen there. It gets very interesting. Anyway, now let's get into looking at how to do a few things on the shawl. So I am going to shift my view to the down camera. An exciting look at my bookshelf. Okay, we're going to spotlight this. It's being a bit overexposed right now, you rascally thing. So what we're looking at is our Rose Trellis Shawl here. And I wanted to point something out that is going to cause trouble for a few people. And I did see in the chat that somebody really likes the blossom buds, and I will say yay, because I like them so much. I use them in 2 shawls because I just enjoyed knitting them. And to me, they really do look like little flowers. So here we see 2 different rows of blossom buds, and you see that there is a section of stocking stitch after the blossom buds. This has 6 rows. So there's 6 rows on each side of the blossom buds until you get to the last set. And then there's only 4 rows on each side. Now, the issue with this is that some people are going to forget that it's only 4 rows, and they're going to knit through the fact that it's 4 rows and do the 6 because they've got the habit. If you do that, all is not lost. If you get to the end of your mosaic and you realize, oh my goodness, I did 6 instead of 4, that's fine. You can deal with that when we do the border in a very easy way. And I know at least 3 people have done that so far. So do not feel, if that happens to you when you get there, that you are alone. So Karen is saying she's one of those people. She did 6. And so we talked about what to do on the border, and it worked out just fine. But just drawing everybody's attention to that, because it's near the end of the shawl. And if you're like me, you're in the rhythm, you're doing things, stuff's happening. And all of a sudden you get to the end and you're like, oh, that was different. So drawing attention to that little piece there and making sure that you know it's not going to harm a thing. What will happen to the next mosaic band is absolutely nothing will go wrong. The only thing that you'll get is a few extra stitches at the end. The whole math on this band will work just fine, and you won't notice any issues at all. You won't be able to tell that you've done that until you get to most of the end of the border, and you're like, wait a minute. If you count the stitches before you start the border, you'll notice that you're wrong. If you count the stitches at the end of the border, you'll notice that you can't do the last chart. No big deal. So we are going to talk about how to fix that if you do that. And I am famous for forgetting an increase here and there along the edge and being a couple of stitches off. If that happens to you, you get to the point where you are finished the mosaic, you are now ready to start putting the border on, and your stitch count is wrong, it doesn't matter. I give you full permission not to go back and fix it. If it really drives you nuts, you could do a couple of KFBs in your last bit of garter stitch, the last pair of garter stitch rows in the mosaic chart itself to bring the number up, or we can deal with that at the end of the knit-on lace, because this particular lace is very flexible in terms of the number of stitches that you've got left. So if you have the wrong number, it's not going to hurt anything, because we can fix that at the end and no one will ever know, I promise you. So like I say, this is a thing I am famous for doing. Oh, I knit Staycation, which is one of my other designs, several times, and at least 2 of them, there's a stitch count error in there. And so I did pick it up partway through the shawl, and I just threw in a couple of extra stitches, and it didn't make any difference. But with this one, it's very amenable to being slightly off on your stitch count. Just drinking tea because we've got smoke here in Calgary, and it's made me really hoarse. Hopefully we will all be able to understand me all the way through. So when we get to the end of the mosaic, the border on here is a knit-on border. It's kind of a fun thing to do because you will have all of those live stitches, as they're called, on the needle. And then as you knit this lace border, you're going to connect it to the live stitches of the shawl body. And as you do that, that will end up binding them off. So this is a way of doing an edge that I really enjoy because I can do something interesting with it. And just a plain bind off to me is so boring that it's about the last thing in the world that I want to do. The border on this shawl is a very interesting one because this one goes back quite a few decades, and you'll actually find it in a lot of stitch dictionaries, including Barbara Walker. But in order to get it to face the direction I wanted to for this shawl, I actually had to redesign it to mirror image what's normally put into stitch dictionaries. So normally we would have had to knit it from the other end, which would have meant that we would have to change the other end of the shawl in order to start it, and then we would have had the wrong side on the right side. So I mirror imaged it, and then I made it a little bit narrower. But this one, I've been able to find it going back at least 80 years, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back further than that because it's got a couple of interesting little techniques in it that, well, the tech editor on this shawl was like, no, that can't be right. You've got to have it wrong. And I'm like, nope, that's right. It's just an old way of doing lace. And I find old laces really interesting because people were very adventurous in those days, and they didn't really worry about if something was going to break rules. They just made it their own and would knit it in such a way as to get it to do what they want it to do. So this lace is a bit intriguing the way that it's done because the very first leaf here doesn't have much of a stem. So these are leaves with a stem. And the first one will not have that stem. It basically just has your cast on edge. So when we begin the border for this shawl, we are going to cast on some stitches, and I used a cable cast on for this. If you loathe and despise cable cast ons, use a knitted cast on, which is almost exactly the same thing, or whatever you want to do in order to get those extra stitches to start your border. But the advantage to the cable is that it gives you a little bit of a thicker, rounder edge, so it rather looks like a stem on this leaf, even though technically it doesn't have one knit into the body of the lace the way that the others do. So the cable cast on gets us to get the number of stitches that we need in order to work the lace. I'm going to demonstrate how to do that, and I'm going to demonstrate doing the lace because, like I say, there's a few things that are a little bit unusual with it. So we're going to go to our pattern. So once we have done all of our mosaic roses, you can see here that it tells you to break the main color and leave CC1 attached. So that's your contrast color, and in the original, that's the purple. So you'll have 2 colors that you've been alternating throughout the mosaic, and you're going to break the background color. You don't need that one anymore. That end can get woven in, and you're going to continue on with the contrast color. However, this is another place where you can customize. If you don't think you have enough yarn to knit your border, and technically you should based on the amounts that are built into this shawl, but if you're like me, you're going to knit off gauge and you're going to make it bigger than the original. So if you're worried about that, you can change colors at this point. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate this border, and I'm going to start with a new color because that way you can see how easy it is. So you can either change colors at this point, or you can use that contrast color to make your border. One of the tricks of making this border lie nice and flat is to change your needle size. This border would have to have the body blocked out quite tightly in order to be able to see the leaves properly if you stay with the same needle size. So I did a lot of experimenting and found dropping a needle size with your right hand needle, that actually is the one that's going to form the stitches in the border, is going to tighten up your stitches and your leaves will show better. So when I did this border with the same needle sizes in the body of the shawl, the leaves were a bit rumply and they just were a little bit harder to block. What rumply means is that I had a border that was ruffled. You can do that. If you like the idea of a ruffled border, do it. There's no reason why not. It could be quite fun if it was. It just means that when you go to block the shawl, you're going to have to do a lot of fiddly pinning out of the border in order to get your leaf shapes to show. If you don't want that, if you want it to lie flat the way that it does here, then drop a needle size to tighten up on your border stitches. If you don't drop a needle size, just be aware of the fact it's going to take more yarn, because that's something that, again, periodically I myself will forget. And it drives me a little bit nuts when I do that, because I realize that I've got a problem in terms of my yarn quantities. So dropping a needle size reduces the amount of yarn. And that can be a situation where you want to think about, do I have enough? If you're not sure, you can just join another yarn, another colorway, and go ahead and work from there. So when we're working the border here, you're going to find that there are two charts for the border. They are exactly the same, except for one thing. One of the charts, this one here, the top one, has a stitch that forms the stem for each leaf. And as you knit one repeat of the chart, you're forming the stem for the next leaf on, which is why the first time that you work the chart, you don't form the stem for the first leaf. The second chart has no stem in there because you're going to end the shawl. And let me show you the other end here. So our other end doesn't have a leaf in this a leaf stem in this section. It's just plain stitch. And this is why, if you don't have the right number of stitches for your border, you've got a fudge area to work with, because it's actually reverse stocking stitch here and then bound off. So you've got lots of leeway in this part of your border to deal with possibilities of not having the right number of stitches in your border. So if you accidentally work 6 rows on each side of the blossom buds instead of 4, you won't have the right number of stitches to work the entire leaf edging chart too. That's all right. Just bind off once you come to the end of the body stitches and you'll be fine. If you don't have enough stitches, so if you have too many stitches, you can do that. There's lots of different ways you can end up with wrong numbers of stitches. So if you don't have enough stitches, just end where you are and bind off, because you see how there's quite a bit of plain reverse stocking stitch there. So if you were short a few stitches, it doesn't matter. You're just going to have less of this section of the border there. So I chose to do it like this because, like I say, I am the queen of not quite having all of my increases in there. With this particular shawl shape, it's pretty hard to get too many increases in there, but it's super easy to forget 1 or 2 and be off by a couple of numbers. And as you can see here on this end, you will end up just with a couple more stitches there or a few less, and it doesn't matter if you're off the stitch count at this point. So lots of ways to fudge it if you forget some of those. And if you forget them and you are further into the body and you realize you're off stitch count, just throw a couple of knit front and backs into any sort of place in the shawl, in the garter, and you'll get back to where your stitch count should be. So you can hide them very easily. I have practiced hiding this sort of thing for many years because I used to be super picky about it. And then life became too short for that sort of nonsense. And I just fix it on the fly now, which has made me a much less stressed knitter. Okay, so what we're going to do to begin our border is we can work from either the charts, and remember to start with chart 1. Start with chart 1. Sometimes when we flip the page to this, we'll just start with the one that's easiest to see because our eye is drawn to our lovely model Naomi here wearing the shawl. You want to make sure you're working with chart 1. And then going back to our instructions. So it will tell you with the right side facing using contrast color 1, cast on 5 stitches using a cable cast on. So I have here my pseudo piece and we're going to do a cast on here. I'm changing colors because I'm not going to knit with the body color because I didn't feel like doing alternating rows when I started the swatch. And I'm going to go down a needle size with my border needle. So the right-hand needle can go down a needle size because the stitch size is determined by the working needle on the right. The left-hand needle is just holding the stitches. It's not actually creating the size of the stitches. So you can do this with 2 different sizes of needles with no problems. So to join what I do, I don't get all fancy and I don't get all fussy about what I'm doing. I literally just put my needle in and start working with and weave in the tail later. So a cable cast on is a knitted cast on that's done between stitches. So I've put my needle between the stitches. I'm just going to loop my yarn around and I'm going to make my first cast on stitch. When you are doing a knitted cast on or a cable cast on, you can pop the stitch on that way, or you can turn the stitch and put it on that way. I have found it makes very little difference. I have done a whole bunch of things in terms of doing them both ways to see what the difference is. There's very minimal difference, and this is the way that I've been doing it since my mother taught me this when I was 4, so I'm just going to keep doing it the way that I do it. Both ways of putting the stitch onto the needle are going to give you that nice cabled edge which will act like your stem for the first leaf. This is a very sharp needle and probably should have grabbed one that was a little duller, but is what it is. So these 5 cast on stitches here, and you can see that nice cabled edge on there, are going to be the stem of the first leaf. So the next instruction is work row 1 of the leaf edging chart to the last stitch of the chart, and then you knit this stitch together through the back loop with 1 stitch of the shawl body. So we have that both in the chart as a symbol and in the written there, just to remind you, because we're going to work this row, and what this weird squiggly symbol is, which you don't see that often, that's the symbol that says knit 2 together through the back row or through the back loop. So why are we knitting them together through the back loop? That gives you a nice clean edge on the right side where your border is. So I don't want to see this other color popping through each of the stitches. So if we knit them together through the back loop, then we get that nice clean edge. On the back, you can see that little bit of a dot on each one of those knit 2 together through the back loop. And to me, that looks untidy. So that's why you want to remember to knit through the back loop. If you don't like doing that, I give you permission to not, and then you'll just have a little white dot on the front or whatever your other contrast color is. So doing it this way will give you a nice clean junction between the two, between the body stitches and this, without having a little dot of color. So let's knit this row. Help if I had my pattern in front of me. And making sure that I am centered. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to knit 2, yarn over. I like nice big yarn overs, so I don't want them too huge in this. There's 2 different ways that you can do it. You can go between the needles and around, or you can go over the top and around. That gives you a bigger yarn over, but in the lace on the edge here, that's not going to block out. So I just want to mention that. Yarn over, knit, yarn over, knit, and now we're going to knit 2 together through the back loop. So I'm going to put my needle together through the 2 stitches. They're at the back of the needle on the left, and knit those 2 together. And now I've connected my lace border to the first stitch there. And then we're going to turn, and then we're going to do an increase because this leaf lace makes arcs throughout. So just turn the work. And now you're going to bring the yarn between the needles so that you can work your knit front back. And you're just going to continue on with your chart. So I'm going to knit a few rows of this so that you can see what we're doing. Now, I did say that you can use this needle and it doesn't affect the stitches. I actually have a bigger needle on the right. So on the wrong side rows, it affects it a bit, but it's just plain old stocking stitch. So there's not too much of an issue there. The main stitches that we want tightened up are going to be on the right side rows. So I'm just clarifying what I said earlier. So that's where I want them tightened up, and it does help just to keep that lace from being rumpled. So now we're on row 3. Wow, I really don't like this needle on the right. It's like I got sent it by the needle company to test it, and it really is not nice with this particular yarn. It's just too pointy and sharp. So you do want to watch out for also those sneaky little purl stitches because they start creeping in because there's reverse stocking stitch to help set off your leaf. So then again, we've gotten to the end here and you see there's a gap between the 2. That's what you're expecting to see. Needle through both of them, knit 2 together through the back loop. Now in the end, I am going to knit 1 leaf repeat at you because I want to show you a couple of weird things about them. So this is a great time if you have questions about this. And on this next wrong side row, I start with a purl stitch. So I'm going to make my purl stitch without putting anything between the 2 stitches. It's just fine. And I have a KFB. Anyway, this is a great time to ask any questions and feel free to unmute if you would like to. And again, we'll do this border, but then I'm going to show you just a plain old I-cord because they can be quite nice borders as well. And there's a couple of little tricks that I'm going to show you in regards to a few things that can happen with our shaping in here. So I did this through the entire shawl, had to remember where I was because it feels like there should be so many stitches here, but actually there aren't. Yarn over. Keep this where you guys can see it. And for those who are curious, I flick knit And if you are finding it difficult to follow what I'm doing with my knit stitches, let me know, because I can switch to continental if need be. I will be a little bit slower with it, but I can do that. Now, always when we get here, you're going to expect to see this gap. That's completely normal. You're not going to worry about it. And we're just going to knit those two together through the back loop. So on the right side rows, you're knitting two together through the back loop, which does not actually decrease the width of the border. It just connects it to there, to your main body stitches. And then always on the wrong side rows here for most of these, you're going to be increasing. So only on the last couple of rows, and actually the last wrong side row, are we not increasing anymore. So just keep an eye open for those. Okay, so we start off with 2 purl stitches now, because what we are doing is we are getting our leaf stem to angle out. Okay, so we're going to get to the decreasing part of the leaf now. Okay, so now we are at this point in the chart, and we're going to start shaping the leaf itself. So the leaf is shaped by some decreases on both sides that will bring it to a point. The fact that these stitches are moving in both directions gives you that pointed leaf shape, and then we've got reverse stocking stitch surrounding it. And then your knit front and backs are used to create the stem there. So it's quite a clever lace, and I really like this one because it shapes itself in such a beautiful way without a lot of complexity. One of the great debates in this world is how to do the SSK, or the decrease, and there's lots of different ways to do this. So you can do it by slip one knitwise, slip one purlwise, put the needle through the front and knit together. Or you can do them by doing slip one knitwise, which I already had done, slip one knitwise, put the needle through the front and knit them together, and that tends to be my favorite one. You can also do this as a slip one, knit one, pass stitch over. They all do the same thing, which is to create a left leaning decrease. You have my full permission to do whichever one you want. Some of us will find that they can be a bit wonky, and so there is a trick that one can use. I'm just going to finish this row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4. Don't stab the yarn needle. 5. There's a trick that you can use to straighten these out, is what I wanted to say. So 1, 2, 3. I've done something weird, so I have the wrong number of stitches. Isn't that interesting? I always do that when I'm on a Zoom. I might be looking at the wrong row, whatever. Ooh, you need to go to the back. Okay, so there's a trick when you get crookedness or wonky stitches on your decreases. And I think I left one of these deliberately a little bit wonky so that you could see. Yes, I did. Okay, so on here, and let's take this away from the back, SSKs can sometimes, because of the way that the stitches are formed, and if you're curious about the mechanics on this, look at Patty Lyons, because she does some really good descriptions on how to deal with this and why it happens and so on. I am too lazy to worry about my exact method. I've been doing slip one knitwise, knit two together through the back for more decades than I care to think about. If I get a crooked one, there's a really easy way to fix it. And so we have one crooked one left in here. This has been sitting here for months, quietly driving me nuts, but I saved it for this Zoom, because the way to fix it is just take your needle tip, put it through that little bit of a wonky stitch, give it a tug, and you see how it gets straightened out now. So if you have crookedy little stitches with SSKs, you can take your needle and just slip them in and fix them. And so that makes them nice and straight now. And you see how they're a little more prominent once I've done that as well. So it's very easy to fix an SSK that's a little bit twisted. And the reason it happens is because of the tension on the stitches as you are moving these stitches around while knitting them. But it's very, very easy to fix them as well. So here it's nice and straight, but if I'd had a wonky one in there, I could have just taken my needle and gone in there and fixed it. So any questions about the leaf border? Having watched me have one stitch too many on there, I would have had to go back and see what row I was on, but it's a fairly easy thing to do. The main thing I wanted to show you was that you're knitting two together through the back loop on every right side row. And then when we look at the border here, you can see, wow, that's very overexposed there. You can see here that we don't have a lot of color peeking through except at the very start. And when you weave your ends in, let's put that needle behind so we don't see it so much. When you weave your ends in that stitch had gotten a bit loose because I had just started knitting with it, you can hide that little bit of color popping through there. But this leaves a nice, what looks like a nice stocking stitch edge there, and it makes it very clean. So no problems with that. And again, you can see your little sort of stem there starting, and you can see the leaf lace holes. When you go to block this, the easiest way to block the edge of this shawl, if you're wanting a really perfect looking edge, is get yourself a blocking wire or blocking pins. And that's those square chunks of plastic that have multiple pins in them. But I take a wire and I run it through this part of the shawl here. So run it right through. And then that'll hold the edge of the shawl stiff and straight. And then I take pins and I put a pin here and here to open up my leaves. So that's why my leaves are showing nicely. If you want those lace holes to be a little bit bigger, a pin here and a pin here when you're blocking, and it'll pull against your wire without distorting the edge of the shawl. Because if you're not careful when you pin, you can get a bump and a bump and a bump along your shawl. So that was another trick I wanted to show you, was just the blocking there. If you can get a wire in there, or if you can use the blocking pins, it's super fast and easy. Although if you have cats, Karen, I would watch out for this, because chasing wires is my cat's favorite thing. So it's kind of horrible when I go to block a shawl because I'm putting wires in and I've got two cats attacking the end of it at the same time. So it gets very heavy. If you don't have blocking wires and you don't want to invest in blocking wires, just put extra pins along this edge. So put extra, stainless steel pins in there. T-pins are a great one, just to stabilize that edge so that it doesn't get pulled into weird shapes like that. Because if you have the pin in there, you see how that could do that. And I'm a little fussy creature. I want my nice arc of mosaic roses because it's just nice and clean and pretty looking. And if we've gone to the trouble of doing our knit two together through the back loop to attach the border, then we just want a nice smooth edge there as well. So that's blocking that edge. Does anybody want me to do anything else with the lace? I'm just going to check our chat. Okay, so we don't have any questions in there right now. That's great. It's a pretty easy lace to work. Oh, right, I was going to get further on there. So I'm now at a point where I'm going to just jump to the last row because I wanted to show you something in here that's a little bit weird. With this lace, this through, oops, not on the screen, this last row, show the last row. Yes, perfect, Karen, I will do that. So with this lace, this row threw my tech editor for a loop, and she's like, that cannot be right. What is that? So the last row is kind of interesting because what it does is it has 3 decreases in it, but they're not directional decreases. They're done in a way that keeps them flat. So we're on a wrong side, and we're just going to do those. I'm just going to act like 2, 4, 5. There we are. Like we were there. So we're doing our purls. We will have 1 knit stitch in there. We'll do our 1 knit stitch. We'll do our purl stitch. And then we have 3 decreases that are done by a purl 2 together. So what we're going to do those 2 decreases is literally just do a purl 2 together. Then you're going to put the stitch that you just created back on the left needle and purl 2 together. And again, put that back on the left needle and purl 2 together. And then it ends with a knit 2 together. So this is something that's a little bit weird because what you're going to get is a gap. So this gap really threw my tech editor for a loop. She was convinced it had to be wrong because this is unusual. This is the kind of thing that you see in old lace patterns. So they worked with lace on both the right side and the wrong side rows, and they weren't afraid of creating a little bit of a 3D element. When you go to work the first row, when you repeat your chart, you've got that gap, and you're just going to knit as if it didn't exist. Let's get some of this stuff from behind so that you can see that. So when we do this next row, we just go ahead and we knit it as it's written on there. So you can do chart or writtens. So in this case, we just knit, and that's going to create a gap. So this leaf is very truncated, but it's just for purposes of demonstrating. Again, we knit 2 together through the back loop. So you will have a little bit of a rounded, rumply thing going on there. Later on, when you block, this hole is going to mostly disappear. It's basically a giant eyelet, and it helps to pull that leaf in. So when we go back to our actual lace here, if we pull this apart, you see where that hole is there? So there's the hole that we just created with those purl 3 togethers. It disappears, it closes up, and it just gives a little bit of a pucker there. Nothing significant, and when you block it, it's almost invisible. This was in order to pull this leaf edge in at the beginning. So it's part of creating the curve there. If we didn't do this, then you wouldn't get the nice curve on the bottom of the leaf. So it's absolutely intentional. You expect it. Do not get weirded out by it. It's just a plain old purl 2 together cast off. And it's done in a way that uses the same stitch twice, as it were, because that introduces some elasticity. So again, because that edge is elastic, when you block it, you can block it out quite flat and the hole really fills itself in. So that is something that is a little bit unusual about this lace. And if you haven't done a lot of old lace, you'll be like, what is that? But it's really common in older styles of lace to do something like that and give you just a little bit of a 3D element in there. So one of my shawls called Oak Leaf and Acorn uses a really old lace that actually does a knit 12 together on the backside row because it's creating a raised top on an acorn, which is a really neat thing to do. So these older laces will often have little elements like that just to create some texture, and in this case to pull that edge in without having to do a lot of finagling with, more knit 2 togethers and more shaping. So it's a really quick and down and dirty way to cheat in the terms of shaping. And only when you pull it out really tight do you see that hole again. So those holes are there. It's a purl 2 together, slip the stitch you just created back on the left needle, purl 2 together, slip the stitch you just created back onto the left needle, purl 2 together. Now leave that stitch on the right hand needle and do your knit 2 together at the end of the row. So that's what we're doing in that row there. The last chart here, it's still being done at the end. If you don't have enough stitches to do all of that, don't worry about it. You're going to do the wrong side row. And once you've come to the end of the wrong side row, you're just going to cast off at the end of the leaf lace. If you don't get all the way to this part because you have the wrong number of stitches, you're just going to bind off wherever you are. And trust me, it will look fine. I did some swatching on that. Unfortunately, I forgot what they were and ripped them out, but it works just fine. So if you are not a leaf lace person and you loathe the idea of leaf lace, you can also do a plain old I-cord bind off. And I am a big fan of I-cord bind offs. I'm going to do this with a contrast yarn because I also like to throw these in on shawls that don't use them with a contrast color. And I think they're really pretty. So we're going to do the exact same thing where we're going to cast on 3 stitches. And again, I don't bother doing anything fancy with my cast on there. I'm just going to cast on in a knitted style because it gives me a nice finished edge. And I don't worry about the tail. I'm going to weave that in later. When in my world, anything that you can do to make your life easier, is a good thing. So we have our 3 stitches on here. We've got them bound on or cast on. So now we're just going to start working our I-cord. So working the I-cord, we're going to knit 2. Stop that. I talk to my knitting. It has to have words sometimes. We're going to knit 2, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take the last stitch and we're going to connect it to our body stitches. And there's a few different ways to do that. The easiest is just to knit 2 together through the back loop. So you can do that, and then you pass your stitches back to the left-hand needle. You knit 2, and this is going to start forming a 2 quite quickly. Knit 2 together through the back loop. I'm going to do a few more of these so you can see the I-cord forming. And then I'll show you what it looks like if we do a different way of connecting, which is not hard at all. So there's different ways of connecting these borders to the main body. And the difference between them really is the way that it's connected will visually look a little bit different with some of them. So sometimes they're done in a way that, like knitting 2 together through the back loop, means you get a very clean edge. So when we look at it now, we're getting a tube and we're not seeing any of the red color peeking through, and you can see that it's quite round. The other way that we can do this in terms of how it's connected is we knit our 2, and this is basically like an SSK at this point, or a decrease. We're going to slip 1, we're going to knit 1, and we're going to pass the stitch over. So you can see it looks very similar. So why would I do it this way? The reason I do it this way is if I need more elasticity. So for example, on one of my shawls called the Roman Villa shawl, I use this version because it just gives me a little more elasticity in this bind off. Slip 1, knit 1, and then pass stitch over. So I'll knit a few of those so you can compare the two. And again, if you choose to do this on your shawl, there is a trick that will help you with tension, and that is with an I-cord bind off, go up a needle size to get elasticity. So if you knit with the same needle as you have been working the shawl body with, this will be a relatively tight border. And what you might want to do is to go up a needle size to compensate for that. So the difference here is that if you knit two together through the back loop, you're not seeing the other color through this. If you do the knit, slip one, knit one, pass stitch over, you'll see a little bit of the color showing through there because that stitch is looser, but it gives you a little more elasticity than does the one that's knit two together through the back loop. So there's two different ways of attaching your I-cord border, and it's completely up to you what you prefer. Both of them look very nice on the back side. And if you like the look of the back side better than you do the front side, then you can actually work this starting from the other end of the shawl. So if you began on the wrong side and work this with the wrong side facing, then this is what the I-cord will look like. So that is also a trick that I often use, is I start on the wrong side and do my I-cord bind off on the wrong side. So what would that look like? And it is not a problem at all to do that because you're just going to have it on a circular needle if possible. And you're just going to start off working on this end just like you did on the other. And there's no difference in how you work it. You're still attaching to the body stitches. It's just the wrong side would be facing you. So quite an easy way to do an alternate bind off. And it just looks different on both sides. Neither side is wrong. It's completely up to you. This one, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a ditch in between the I-cord and the body of garter. And so it all, again, is up to you as to what you like better. You can always knit a swatch and take a look at the two sides and decide. If you like the ditch and the round edge hovering a bit above the garter, then work the I-cord bind off on the wrong side of the shawl. If you like it right up against the body of the garter and actually looking like it's tucked right into this garter row, then work it on the right side. So that's an alternate way of binding off for this shawl that can be very pretty. I would still do it with a contrast color in my preferences, because then I would have a difference between the last row worked of the main color on there, which is light, or depending if you flip the colors in the shawl dark. But anyway, you'd have contrast between the bind off and the main body of the shawl. And I think that can be really pretty. This would be something too that you could use a completely different color. So if you had your shawl in your original colors and you wanted to do something different, you could work this with a completely different color and an I-cord bind off, just like you could if you work the leaf lace, which is the bind off. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about what you can do with your shawl. Do the people that are here right now have any questions? And feel free to unmute if you do. Otherwise, maybe we could do a little bit of show and tell. And I'm going to remove my spotlight. So if you would like to share your shawl, just put your hand up and I will spotlight you so that we can see it. Karen is offering to share. Let me just hit the spotlight. So Karen, you're muted.
Not anymore. So I haven't blocked it yet, but I am finished.
That's fantastic.
I did do the mess up on the last blossom bud and put in too many rows, but you taught me how to fix that, so it was good. And I don't think anybody, and I didn't run out of yarn, so it's not like it was a big deal. So there's my shawl. Again, my main color is Christmas treats, and my contrast color is Where the Giant Squid Live.
I absolutely love it.
So.
And, you know, honestly, that little change there, I threw that in. And the reason I did is that I like to have a certain percentage of the yarn left. Plus, the way that the math worked for me was a way that a math nerd was happy about. But it honestly makes almost no difference whatsoever. There is, as Karen said, enough of a margin there that you're just fine. Okay, let us switch to Sarah, who has her hand up. Sarah, your camera is not on, so I can spotlight you if you want to turn your camera on and share your shawl.
So I've actually got two devices. You can probably spotlight the other one.
So we have an interesting echo going on. If you have two devices logged in, then it's probably they're too close.
I'm not very far along.
Okay, there's Sarah. Yep, that's it. That's what's going on. Okay, let me spotlight the camera one. Oh, that's beautiful.
So I used rose blossom, or not, apple blossom as my main color, and labyrinth is my contrast color.
Oh, what a fun combination. I love that. It's very pretty and I like the drama on it. Well, thank you for sharing, Sarah. Would somebody else like to share? Oh, Tanya, you've got some really interesting colors going in yours. All right, you're on.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I did this particular shawl up because I wanted something for Christmas, but I didn't want the traditional white. So I went with the beach pebble, because I think you have beach pebble as one of your colors in one of your kits, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but I knew I wanted to use the Shara by Moonlight, I guess, is the red color, but I really struggled with the green that I wanted to use. So my husband and I went down to the studio, and with Dan's help, I think we must have dragged out about 10 different greens. And then we all decided on the one that we wanted to use, or the one I was going to use.
Well, I think you guys came up with a beautiful choice. It does look exactly right for Christmas, but
it does.
You know, on another hand, it doesn't scream Christmas either, so you could certainly wear it at any time of the year.
No,
I really like that.
Actually, I think it screams more Italian, but whatever.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Did you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I am seeing something in the chat. So Nicole has asked if I could re-go over fudging the end. Absolutely. So let me switch to my down camera, because I'm fuzzy. Okay. And I need to spotlight myself again. Oh, I wish they'd stop moving. So there we are. Spotlighting all of you guys is in a completely different place from spotlighting myself. So when we look at our leaf edging chart 2, technically you should have enough stitches to get all the way to the end of this chart. However, sometimes you are going to have more stitches, so you're not done. In that case, I would do what it says here. That's going to bring you down to 5 stitches, and then I would continue to knit stocking stitch until you have all of the body stitches used up. And then what you will do is just bind off those stitches at the end. So you're basically going to jump right to the end of the leaf border once you're finished, and you just bind them off purlwise again. That just gives you a nice firm edge that's going to mimic the cable cast on. So if you have too many stitches, just keep knitting beyond the chart with your 5, and you won't have any issues there. It won't show because this is tapered anyway. So you'll see there's a little bit of a taper here. If you had a few extra rows of stocking stitch there, you'd never know. It's going to look just fine. If you don't have enough stitches, then what you're going to do is you're just going to bind off wherever you are. So don't worry about binding off wherever you are, because you'll notice that the tip of that leaf is not right at the end. So you've got quite a few that you can get rid of without harming the look of the leaf itself at all. It looks in the chart like it goes all the way to the end, but you've got lots of flexibility there. And the final rows are not actually in the chart, now that I remember that. The final rows are in written, and that's where your stocking stitch is. So you can bind off at any point in the chart itself. It won't really hurt the look of the last leaf. Or if you need to add rows in here, just keep doing what it says in this row here, these 2. If you don't have enough, leave this out. And if you need to, leave part of the chart out. So I did experiment with it when I was doing the design work, and it didn't hurt the look of it at all. So even if you didn't get the tip of the leaf, it's still going to be a recognizable leaf. It'll just look a little bit rounder because the bind off is going to put that little tip on the leaf anyway. So you've got some leeway either way if you have too many or too few stitches to just finish the leaf without having any problems in terms of the look of it. So once again, if you have too many stitches and you're left with some stitches after you've done this, just keep on repeating those 2 rows until you've used up all of your body stitches. If you don't have enough to do this, just stop wherever you are, and your bind off is going to be done exactly as it says here. It's a wrong side row that you do the bind off on. So you'll just get to the next wrong side row where you've used the last body stitch, and you're just going to do your purl two together bind off. And you see what that looks like here. It just gives you that nice cable-y looking edge. And what it does is it lies flat on the wrong side. So you don't have like a big ridge on the edge of the shawl. That's why I did the purl two together. If you loathe and despise that 5-stitch bind off with purl two together, do whatever you want. No one's ever going to look at it and worry about it. But this does give you a little bit of place to play with those extra stitches. So designed on purpose in order to give you a little bit of fudge room there, because these asymmetric bias shawls are so easy to accidentally get the wrong number of stitches on. And quite frankly, I was surprised when I knit this one that I didn't have the wrong number of stitches, because it would have totally not surprised me if I did. So absolutely something that you can fix. It will not hurt the look of your shawl at all. And also all through it, because asymmetric bias shawls are problematic, I did not do a specific number of stitches on the end of any of the sections, because it allowed some fudge room for that sort of thing. The only thing that it might affect are your blossom buds. When you get to the end of the rows on those, you may have a slightly different number of stitches from the way the patterns worked. Just do the last one that you can fit in, and then just purl the end of the row with doing your yarn over and so on. Just finish the row. So I am a master of, I am too old for that business of ripping huge amounts back because I made a mistake ages ago. Again, either add an extra stitch in somewhere with a knit front and back, often doing them right on the edge, you won't see them, or just don't worry about it, knit the shawl, and there is plenty of margin in the ends of each of these sections that you won't run out of stitches if you've got the wrong number. And if you have too many, that's no big deal either. It's not going to affect anything. So, anybody else have any questions or want to do any show and tell while we're here? Cecile would like to. Okay, let me spotlight Cecile.
Unmute there. So I'm not finished, and I have the original colors, and that's what attracted me to the shawl, was the colors. So I went along with them. At one point, I noticed that my stitch count was way off. So what I did, rather than try and figure out how many I should put and where I should put them, I just did extra rows. So in this section here, I think it's that one. Let's see. No, this one. My last, yeah, this section. I have some extra rows in here. And I had lots of yarn, so I even have an extra skein. So I thought, well, what the heck? So I did.
Yeah, I think
I did like a catch up, so that I have the right number of stitches to continue.
I think that's a brilliant way to go.
Whoops.
It's a brilliant way to go, and I think it's going to look really nice. The thing about knitting is that it's a living art and it's a living thing. And so, you know, one of the things I try to encourage knitters is to do exactly what you did. Make it your own, and it will look lovely. There is no problem with changing them up. And like I say, sometimes Karen's saying, and no one will ever know, she's absolutely right. Like I say, there's one of my shawl samples that's out in our studio and people look at it all the time. And there are what I would consider to be egregious mistakes in it. And yet I will challenge people to find them, and they can't. And if you want to know secretly what the egregious mistakes are, is I simply have some stocking stitch on the edge of a border that's supposed to be garter, but you don't see it. So even though I know it's there, every time I show it to people, I have to try and find it in order to show it. So Cecile, thank you. Your shawl is beautiful. And I'm so glad that you like the colors, because they really spoke to me.
Like my last shawl, when I did cherry blossom, I ran out of yarn for the border. So I have to get more. So I'm thinking, I don't know now whether I'll have enough, but I'm also thinking maybe if I find the right color of green in my stash, I might put a green border for the leaves.
Absolutely. I was super tempted to do that myself, but I figured the cost of the kits was going to get a little bit excessive if I did that. So I used the contrast color, but I think green would be really fun. There is a margin built into the main color. it's just going to depend on your tension as to whether you have enough or you'll have to break into that extra.
Yeah, it's just the CC1 for the border, right? That I have to worry about.
Yeah, the border is CC1, so it's your main color, and there's a margin built into both of them. But like I say, it's hard to guess right now as to whether you'll have enough or not.
Yeah, and I don't know how I'm going to establish that, but.
Well, what I would do is just keep on knitting, and if you need to get another one wound, then you'll know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
Like right now, one could do some weighing and some math, but I'm like, life is too short for that nonsense.
And I realized after I got the kit that I had knit a sweater in this color, in the Wild Things, I think it's called.
Yes, it's Little Wild Things.
And I was running out a little bit of yarn, and I had gotten another skein of just a yellow, I think, just to finish the borders and stuff. And I found another skein in my stash, so I've got tons of this stuff. It might be socks.
You can always exchange it. Either that, or you and I will both enjoy that color together, because that is one of my ones that's near and dear.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. That's actually one of my very first speckle colorways, and it means a lot because it's all about trips my mom and I used to take in the spring to look for little tiny orchids. So, you know, it's one of the ways I remember my mother, who's gone now for 10 years, but every time I look at it, I'm like right there with her. So thank you for sharing all those. And that is an excellent suggestion in terms of how to fix your stitch count as well, because let's face it, this shawl is fun to wear, and a few extra rows aren't going to hurt at all.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any desire to share their shawls, or should we call it a day and I release you into the afternoon knitting? I'm not seeing any hands up, so I think that means that I will thank everyone for attending. I'm just going to check the chat. Yep, we all look really good here. No additional questions. So like I say, thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us in this knit along. It's always a ton of fun to do these with you, and I'm really glad that we had so many wonderful shawls coming out of this particular summer. So I hope you enjoy them for years to come, and I will see you for the next one next year. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.